In just the opening 5 minutes of The Witcher 3, we see a horse get decapitated, a bird colliding with a man's eyeball, and also a lingering shot of a woman's ass. If any of this puts you off, then it's probably best to stop watching this video, because The Witcher 3 might not be your kind of game. This game is widely regarded as one of the greatest RPGs ever. In fact, I can confidently say that this is my favourite video game of all time, and it's easy to understand why. It's not only my personal favourite game, but it's also the game that I have the most hours in. Not only did I finish it 3 times, but each playthrough made me sink over 100 hours into the world, and that's not including the DLCs like Blood and Wine and Hearts of Stone. I'll most likely make a separate video on those, as I have way too much to talk about for those particular DLCs. I do wish this game did come out in 2014 instead of 2015, simply because I can title my video 10 years later instead of 9, which looks more appealing on the eye. But regardless, even after 9 years since The Witcher 3's release, it remains one of the most unique and innovative RPGs. In fact, when it was released, it won Game of the Year in 2015. Now, what a lot of people may not know is that it's also the game with the most awards in history, with a whopping total of 281 as of me making this video. In fact, I would not be surprised if by the time this video is out, it got given another award. The Witcher 3 not only destroyed its competition in awards, but it toppled iconic games such as Skyrim, Red Dead Redemption, The Last of Us, Uncharted 2, Half-Life 2, and even Resident Evil 4. The legacy that The Witcher 3 has is very well deserved. Even now, with the recent next generation update, you're able to revisit the game in all of its glory with visuals that are better than ever before. Now, I have not played the original Witcher game, and for good reason too. It simply does not hold up in today's standards. But I have played The Witcher 2, and what I love about The Witcher 3 is that you don't have to stress about what you might have missed in the first 2 games. All you need to know is that you play as a witcher named Geralt of Rivia, who pretty much makes a living by hunting and killing creatures for money. Everything from the world, whether it's the depressing tone of Velen, all the way to its rugged peaks of Skellige, Geralt's story, the characters, and so much more is what solidifies this game as my personal favourite of all time. In The Witcher 3, a massive piece of enjoyment for me lies in the exploration of its very unique world. The game guides you through a very diverse set of locations, each possessing a unique ambience and atmosphere to them. From the war-ravaged landscapes of Velen to the very packed city of Novigrad and even the rugged peaks of Skellige. Every part of the game's world has its own special features, and they affect both how the game looks and how you have to play it. For example, getting through the thick forest in Velen is a much more different challenge compared to moving around the crowded streets in Novigrad. The changing day-night cycles and different weather conditions don't just make the game look different, they also have an impact on how you play. For example, some creatures and monsters would only come out at night, or when the weather is a certain way, and I love that. Monster nests and Witcher contracts play a pretty important role in the game's exploration. These features have a dual purpose, where they deepen the game's lore and offer you challenging combat encounters. Each monster nest or Witcher contract would kind of tell a mini story, further adding to the lore side of the game's world. In the most well-popular RPG games, there's traditionally been a distinction between story-driven quests and open-world exploration. For instance, games like Skyrim offered a large open world with pretty much no focus on a story at all. Skyrim pretty much relied on its large size and emergent storytelling. There's also games like Dragon Age Inquisition, which featured numerous major story missions. Yet they were largely separate from the open-world elements, which honestly, looking back at it now, is a somewhat unusual choice for a studio like BioWare, who are often known for providing stories and choices in nearly every quest. However, in The Witcher 3, the line between the amount of storytelling you'll encounter during exploration is not always clear. At one point during the game, I remember travelling up a hill with the intention of just revealing a point of interest, only to stumble upon what seemed to be ending of a Witcher contract questline. Of course, during this time, I'm pretty sure I was underleveled by about 30 levels, so I just did a U-turn and got the fuck out of there. Even though I was massively underleveled for that encounter, it made me feel like I was really truly exploring a living, breathing world, where danger and opportunity could lurk around every corner. This also can be a deliberate design choice. What initially appears to be a standard monster contract can unexpectedly evolve into a fully fledged questline, reuniting Geralt with a former comrade, or even transitioning from a mere hunt and battle affair into a mystery that delves into the moral dilemmas of exterminating these strange creatures. The Witcher 3 introduced a feature that changes the way you explore. It's a way for you to experience the world from the perspective of a Witcher, and with these Witcher senses you get to see what Geralt sees, whether it's the tracks of a creature that you're hunting down, hidden traps, or just hints to solve a mystery. It's honestly like having a detective tool that turns exploring from just searching around into actively uncovering things. Exploring the game's naval side, whether by boat or a simple swim, comes with its own set of rewards. You can stumble upon treasures beneath the water's surface or even on remote islands. These treasures are not just arbitrary finds. In fact, often at times they can come with stories attached, such as shipwrecks or even lost travelers. Interacting with the NPCs in this world go beyond simple dialogue. They are actually opportunities for world building. You can even reveal hidden quests, deepen the lore, and often at times even influence the state of the game's world just by simply talking to an NPC. The design choice ensures that exploration is much about interaction as it is about traversal. Velen, Novigrad, Skellige, and even Kaer Morhen. These are the 4 main regions when it comes to The Witcher 3's base game. Now, the reason I did not mention White Orchid is because I honestly class it more as a smaller starting area and there's not much to do there, but what I do want to talk about first is Velen, a province that's described as a war-ravaged no man's land. I love that Velen shows how the game's world and story together make the game feel atmospheric in this specific region. It's quite a large part of the game where war has left its mark and it's steeped in despair. The war that came from it inflicted unspeakable horrors upon the people, including death, sexual violence and public executions. Yet it's also brimming with engaging stories and very interesting characters. And speaking of interesting characters, at the centre of Velen lies the Bloody Baron, a character who represents the moral grey areas and deep emotions of what the game is famous for. Philip Strenger is his real name, and he's a man who carries the weight of his past. He may seem like a ruthless warlord on the outside, but underneath he's tormented by his own actions. The way that the Baron rules Velen is pretty harsh, and seems to be a perfect representation of Velen itself. The Baron's soldiers are poorly behaved and often mistreat the local people. There's not much law and order in Velen, and there's also a shortage of food and supplies in the region. The Bloody Baron's questline for me feels like it's not just a series of regular story missions. It's a journey that explores the consequences of war, the difficulties of family relationships, and even the search for redemption. The Bloody Baron questline blends together several storylines, finding Ciri, the tragic tale of the Baron's family, and also the hidden dark secrets of Velen. The storytelling unfolds pretty naturally, with each revelation and decision I made shaping the eventual outcome in the end. Throughout his story, I was often faced with choices that really lack clear solutions. This difficult decision making is a perfectly defining feature of The Witcher 3 storytelling, where it forces you to grapple with the intricacies of your decisions and your far-reaching consequences. I was honestly torn between either resonating with the Baron's actions or being disgusted at his actions. The Witcher 3 does a great job of making you want to feel sorry for him, and it does this in a way where storytelling is the centre of it all. Beyond the main focus of the Bloody Baron questline, the game also does a great job with its side quests and encounters in Velen, whether it's dealing with the crones of Crookback Bog or unraveling the mystery of the Whispering Hillock. These side stories in Velen first start off as part of the main story, but eventually turn into side quests, yet these stories smoothly intertwine with the main story. As somebody who appreciates well-crafted stories in video games, these questlines in Velen with the Bloody Baron, the crones of Crookback Bog, and also the Whispering Hillock all left a very promising impression on me, where I just knew the rest of The Witcher 3 was a game that I would love, and what happened after Velen would not disappoint. Now, going beyond the narratives that unfold in Velen, I want to talk about how great Velen is as an actual region, and how it fits perfectly with what the game is trying to go for. The swamps in Velen are quite literally a perfect example of how this game tells its story through the environment. These dark and dangerous marshlands hold some of the game's creepiest stories and creatures, and just navigating through them is pretty tough because of the constant threat of monsters like drowners and water hags. Velen's environment is like a character in its own. The scary forests, empty villages and destroyed battlefields show the damage that's caused by the war. The Witcher 3 does such a great job of paying attention to every little detail, like the fields in the wind and the old ruins. Even the weather and day-night cycles matter. This all makes Velen feel more real, and it affects how NPCs and monsters behave. Novigrad, a city that is the complete opposite of what Velen is. Novigrad is, I believe, the second region we go to during the game. This specific city offers a very striking contrast to the war-torn scenes of Velen, showcasing the game's ability to create more diverse and immersive worlds. It's a city that enjoys a level of freedom, well, at least for most of the game that is. The city is divided into various districts, encompassing workplaces, upper-class areas, and even less fortunate neighbourhoods for the poor, creating a very multifaceted urban landscape. I did get the feeling that this city felt alive, and there's good reason for that. Now here's something that a lot of people may not know. Of course, if you're a die-hard Witcher fan, you probably know this. And that is the name Novigrad draws inspiration from the Russian city of Novgorod. Sorry if I butchered that pronunciation, I probably did. Now Novgorod, which like Novigrad in the game, declared itself an independent city for quite a long period of time. However, it also bears resemblance to the Polish city of Gdansk, a city that declared itself independent. Now what's particularly striking is the similarity in their coat of arms, including colours and various symbols. Oh, and Novigrad docks in the game features a crane that closely resembles the one in present day Gdansk, adding yet another similarity of a real life connection. The atmosphere in Novigrad in the game is pretty lively, which is a far cry from the somber mood of Velen. Streets are full of activity, merchants flaunt their wares, townsfolk go about their daily lives, and minstrels play in taverns. This liveliness of Novigrad really made me feel like the city is a living, breathing entity. The side quests in this city stand out as some of the most unforgettable moments for me in the game. They offer a mix of mystery, humour, and even, how can you say it, complicatedness. You'll see why when I talk about this specific side quest. For example, there's a quest named Carnal Sins, which delves into the city's darker and hidden aspects, and it's honestly one of my favourite side quests in this game. Now spoiler warning for this side quest as I'm about to delve into it. So after we pretty much rescue Dandelion from the temple guard and assist in restoring the Rosemary and Thyme establishment, we witness a distressing incident occur during the opening night when Priscilla is attacked. In response to this, Dandelion and Geralt quickly rush to the hospital, where the bard implores Geralt to investigate and identify the assailant responsible for the harm inflicted upon Priscilla. Now from this moment is where the side quest starts, and when I first played through it, I had no idea what I was about to experience. You see, unlike many other quests in The Witcher 3, this one takes a more investigative approach. Instead of simply following a monster's trail, we take part in a process of uncovering clues left behind by Priscilla's attacker, and conduct interviews with individuals relevant to the case. I remember the first time I played this quest in my very first playthrough. I'm pretty sure I took the step of killing the Reverend, thinking I had solved the case, and it's pretty mind-boggling that the game allowed such a choice with no follow-up or hint that I might have failed. I went on to play the rest of the game believing I had caught the real serial killer, and it's a commendable aspect of RPG games, where the game world reacts to your choices in unexpected ways. In this case, the killer successfully tricked me. Of course, in my second playthrough of this game, when I did the same side quest, this time I chose to spare the Reverend and had a conversation with him before ultimately deciding what to do with him. This time I uncovered the true identity of the killer, who turned out to be some sort of religious zealot higher vampire, which made me question what on earth I was doing wrong in my first playthrough. This kind of stuff just makes me wonder how many other hidden or alternative paths I might have missed in the game. Of course, this is commendable to the richness and replayability of the Witcher 3 storytelling, and that's just one side quest in Novigrad. There's also a quest named A Matter of Life and Death, and also Now or Never, which shed light on the challenges faced by mages in a city like Novigrad consumed by fear and distrust. These side quests go way beyond simply providing extra gameplay. In fact, they massively improve the city's storyline by allowing you to gain a deeper insight into the lives of NPCs and other characters in Novigrad. Navigating this city started as a confusing thing for me. I pretty much relied on the minimap's guidance to guide me through its cobblestone streets. But with time, the city began to feel like home. It began with simple landmarks like knowing how to get from Hierarch Square to the docks. All I'd need to do is cross the bridge to Temple Island. Then I started recognizing smaller areas. My approach to exploring Novigrad honestly mirrored how I explore in real life. I remembered where the merchants were. Need to find the docks? Well, the Rosemary and Thyme was around the corner. Want to exchange currency? Head to the Kingfisher and then cross the square. Planning a trip to Oxenfurt? Make a stop at the Seven Cast Inn on your way or nearby. But it was not just me self-guiding myself that helped me get acquainted with Novigrad. Through various quests, you get to know the city and its colourful characters. From allies like Dijkstra and Triss, to gang leaders such as Cleaver and Horson Jr., and even enforcer figures like Caleb Meng. These missions take you from bathhouses to brothels, through sewers and even up the tallest towers, making you intimately familiar with Novigrad's layout. The city is classified as its own region, despite its smaller size compared to the likes of Velen and Skellige. It offers more content and activities within its walls than most other areas combined. While Novigrad may not offer the same level of freedom as exploring the likes of Night City in Cyberpunk or Venice from Assassin's Creed, Novigrad to me stands out as the most unique city of them all, even when considering other impressive cities such as Unity's Paris, Syndicate's Victorian London. It's Novigrad to me that stands out the most. Skellige, a region of the game where I had no idea what I was about to experience. I thought it was just going to be another part of the map. Little did I know, it's pretty much an entirely new map in the game, and the size of it, well, it's pretty large. The Skellige Isles are defined by their wild, untamed beauty, featuring towering mountains, dense forests and rocky shores. It's definitely a massive departure from everything we've seen in the war-torn Velen and packed city of Novigrad. In the Skellige Isles, the game transitions from the political intrigues and dark forests to a world that feels very ancient and deeply connected to nature. The region is dotted with Viking-like longships, ancient standing stones and traditional wooden structures, all of which reflect the cultural inspirations that shaped this part of the game. After spending at least over 90 hours trudging to a swampy and crowded city, it definitely was a welcome change of pace to explore the beautiful Skellige Isles at a completely new map. Skellige looks and sounds just as amazing as you'd expect, but personally I'm more stunned by its landscapes, which I find even more enchanting, particularly when complemented by its evocative music. The region's atmosphere just simply exudes a sense of adventure. The music in this region with its haunting tunes and traditional instruments really amplifies this sensation, immersing you in a world that gives off an ancient yet very vibrant aura. Of course, since it's pretty much called the Skellige Isles, the sea will take center stage in shaping Skellige. The sounds of waves crashing against rugged cliffs, the cries of seabirds, and even the frequent storms all contribute to the feeling of a land deeply intertwined with the ocean. It's easy to see that this region is way different than the other regions in terms of how the game wants you to play. Verticality is your best friend, and the hilly terrain on each island gives you different spaces to explore. It's not a case of just moving forward and back anymore, it's now also up and down. It's definitely unique because a lot of the content in Skellige, such as side quests, witcher contracts, points of interest, and so on, are all hidden behind the hilly terrain. Whereas if we compare it to Velen, where it's quite literally all flat, you're able to see your objective because it's right there in the distance. So for Skellige, it's definitely more intimidating, but that's what I love. It was a refreshing change and I'm all for it. I also like that the islands on Skellige are divided into smaller sections, each with its own main focus and main quest. This helps guide your exploration, and it feels like everything you find has a purpose. For example, if I was in Velen, I would often turn off the markers for those unexplored question marks, simply because I knew they wouldn't be of value. In Skellige, it's the complete opposite. I had so much fun exploring this region and actually finding things on my own. Skellige's side quests are as varied and engaging as its landscapes. Quests like the Lord of Unvik and Possession delve into local legends and family sagas, and are pieces of side content that I loved in this game. For example, let's take the Lord of Unvik side quest. I know I mentioned in the Novigrad part of the video that the Carnal Sin side quest is one of my favourites, but this specific side quest in Skellige might just be my personal favourite in the game, simply because it all takes place on one specific island that's just created for this side quest. That just shows the dedication CD Projekt Red had when it came to creating this masterpiece of a game. The atmosphere on this island is incredible. Just reaching it is a challenge and feels like a quest in itself, but once you actually arrive, it's all massive cliffs, flowing rivers, a main lake, and numerous caves to explore. There's even abandoned Viking villages perched on steep cliffs, and it's all truly astonishing to look at. I love that there's just a giant ship built for Ragnarok behind a massive wall. The whole island in general feels like something out of a myth, and you're right in the middle of it. It's definitely a massive difference to all the human settlements we encountered before in Velen and Novigrad. The side quest itself is one of the only side quests in this game with no clear direction. However, it's intuitive enough that I did not have much trouble finding my way around the island to get to where I had to go. I had to navigate through cliffs and multiple caves, but surprisingly I did not get lost, and that's due to the brilliance of CD Projekt Red's guidance. The pathfinding is tricky, but it allows you to figure it out quite easily. Unlike a previous region such as Velen where you have open options and multiple paths, this one is mostly linear. This game cleverly blocks off paths with cliffs and natural barriers, but it does not feel forced like linear maps in other games. The characters in this side quest are quite funny, even though they find themselves in a very dire situation. That entire conversation you have with Velen and the two trolls was a humorous experience, and I was quite relieved I did not have to face the two ice trolls at the same time, because I knew I would have been royally fucked. However, Hjalmar's recklessness and Viking-like attitude never fails to amuse me. Of course, he's from Skellige, so he's known for the Viking-like culture. He led a massive war party to confront a giant, but lost everyone in his command over days of fighting, and yet he insists on continuing the quest. This insane person wants to take on a giant that wiped out his entire crew with just 3 men. Skellige warriors must either be incredibly brave or just on some sort of drugs. You know, actually it's probably a bit of both. Oh, and how could I almost forget the main thing? You fight a goddamn giant and the whole fight scene is pretty insane. So yeah, I can see this side quest and the Carnal Sins being among the top of my favorite side quests in this game. The craziest thing about this all is that these are side quests, not main quests, side quests. That's just insane storytelling. Skellige also has some of the greatest islands and just areas to explore. For example, there's of course Undvik, which I just mentioned. There's the Temple of Freya, which is a large temple and garden dedicated to, of course, the goddess Freya. There's Kaer Morhen itself, which is a stunning location featuring a magnificent castle nestled between two towering peaks on the side of a mountain, and all of that is accompanied by a vast valley that stretches beneath it. I will admit, it is a bit tedious trying to get up to the castle itself, but once you're up there, you get presented with stunning views. So what's not to love about Skellige? It has snow-capped mountains, remote islands, high up buildings in the sky. It pretty much has everything, and honestly is on par with the likes of Descent from the Blood and Wine DLC. Now, I don't really want to spend too much time talking about Kaer Morhen, simply because it's not exactly considered to be a main region similar to Velen, Novigrad and Skellige, but it's still a region in the game where I just sit in awe looking at. Kaer Morhen Valley really exemplifies the game's beautiful environments. It features rugged mountains, dense forests and a winding river flowing through the landscape. Every single detail of this terrain is just stunning, from the cascading waterfalls to the trees. I don't know if it's just me, but does the Kaer Morhen region look way better than every other part of the game? I don't know if it's because it's smaller, but it does seem like a different art style, if that makes sense. Of course, I could be talking out my ass, but I figured I'd just ask that. The visual flair of Kaer Morhen goes way beyond aesthetics, because I like to think it serves as a storytelling tool that conveys the witch's history. Just think about it, the nature of the valley is beautiful, and it's a way different contrast to, let's say, Velen. So in a way, it just symbolizes the isolation and decline of the witches. I mean, that could just be my opinion, but that's how I feel when I explore Kaer Morhen. I see it as a safe house from the outside world, and a place that feels like it's on a different planet entirely. The training grounds, the armory, and the living quarters all share tales of the witch's way of life and traditions. The fortress isn't merely Geralt's residence, it possesses its own personality, filled with stories and memories. The quests within and near Kaer Morhen continue to deepen this connection, whether it's training with Vesemir or the final showdown with the Wild Hunt. Everything happening at this stronghold has its own narrative significance. If you think about it, in a way the fortress is basically the backdrop for character growth, story revelations and some of the game's most heartfelt moments happen here. In essence, the story of The Witcher 3 revolves around Geralt of Rivia's journey to reunite with his lost daughter Ciri, after a fake out with the thought process that he'd be searching for Yennefer instead for a majority of the game. You see, parent/child stories are some of my favourite stories in video games, and for good reason too. The emotional connection of a father-daughter or father-son story really does hit you in the feels. I cannot imagine how actual fathers would feel when playing these types of games. For example, there's the Kratos and Atreus story, the Joel and Ellie story, and the one that hit the most for me is the Sean and Ethan story in Heavy Rain. Funnily enough, one of my first ever videos on this channel was a pretty detailed story analysis video on Heavy Rain. When it comes to The Witcher 3, the more we witness the story unfold, Geralt realizes he must be ready to make sacrifices to shield Ciri from the game's antagonist being the Wild Hunt. Throughout his journey, he becomes deeply embroiled in the political landscape and bears witness to the many horrors resulting from Nilfgaard's invasion. At first, the story begins as a search and rescue to locate a person, but it quickly evolves into a grander narrative involving the salvation of the world and whatnot. This is all before considering the two DLC expansions, Blood and Wine and Hearts of Stone. The first one delves into vampires and stunning landscapes, whereas the second involves interactions with some pretty ominous individuals. The Witcher 3 story does a great job of giving the side quests and contracts full voice acting and their own little stories. Surprisingly, many of them are quite entertaining, and you might mistake them for part of the main story. That's exactly how I felt when I played through the side quests that I just talked about in the Velen, Novigrad and Skellige sections of this video. The start of the story kicks us off in White Orchard, an area of the map that a lot of people actually mistake for Velen itself. This area is a somewhat beautiful countryside that shows why defending the north is important, and the horrifying scenes of the invasion. In one area of White Orchard there's a nice little village with friendly people, but not too far away there's a ruined and burning place that's a complete disaster. White Orchard is different from the rest of the regions and provinces in this game because it shows that people here are mostly friendly, even the Nilfgaardians are somewhat decent, and their commander is a reasonable guy in a tough spot. The thing I love about The Witcher 3 storytelling is how unexpected it can be at times. For example, we see Geralt attempt to help an innkeeper, but the outcome of helping her results in her being shit scared of you. When investigating a haunting by the ghost of a young woman, we uncover a tale of murder involving a local nobleman, yet hints at underlying issues. There's even a side quest involving a local dwarf and an arsonist, which ends on a more tragic note. Everything I just talked about is unexpected, and when you play through The Witcher 3 for the very first time, you don't expect any of this to happen. The start of the story also introduces us to a few characters. Vesemir, who's a bit of an idealist, Yennefer, who was supposed to be the person we were searching for, and even Emperor Emir, a man who I was prepared to dislike simply because of previous Witcher material. The second act of the story takes us to Velen, a war-torn, ravaged landscape. The story in this area of the game revolves around the Bloody Baron and the Ladies of the Wood, aka the Crones of Crookback Bog, who I previously talked about earlier in the video. These two main quests really do highlight the dark nature of the Witcher world. The Bloody Baron, who gives me a very similar impression to Robert Baratheon from Game of Thrones, is a man whose character is more on the interesting side. The Baron does not share any information until Geralt helps him figure out where his family went. It's a very dark and troubling story involving domestic problems, cheating, and even a heartbreaking miscarriage. Geralt learns about the Baron's wife and daughter. The daughter fled to Oxford, but the wife is still missing. At this point in the story, we also encounter Uma for the very first time. Uma is an odd, disfigured entity with an almost baby-like attitude that was won by the Baron in a card game. At that moment in the story, Geralt does not give Uma much thought, but little does he know that this peculiar creature will be of great significance later on in the story. We also get introduced to Kira Metz, an old sorceress acquaintance who is also looking for Ciri. Both Geralt and Kira learn that Ciri might have been connected to the witches of Crookback Bog. This is where we head to the bog to find a strange little town that's filled with children and a slightly crazy old woman. We figure out that this woman is actually the Baron's wife that's being controlled by the Crones of Crookback Bog, who I believe are a terrifying and mysterious take on the Baba Yaga myth. But The Witcher 3 presents it in a very beautifully eerie way. These crones tried to use Ciri as a bargaining chip with the Wild Hunt when she arrived in their swamp. Ciri, on the other hand, saved the Baron's life by using her Elder Blood power to defeat a basilisk. Realizing the Wild Hunt was still after her, she left and rode to Novigrad for help and a place to hide. At this point in the story, we can choose to help the Baron rescue his wife from the crones. This of course turns into a side quest, but you barely notice that it's a side quest. We pretty much fight some monsters that were sent by the crones, but eventually with the help of King Radovid's witch hunters, we manage to rescue the Baron's wife. Whether she lives or dies depends on the choices we made in previous quests, which further expands on my desire for how great of an RPG this truly is. If she dies, it's really tough for the Baron, and he might even take his own life because of it. That's how depressing this part of the game can be, and it's all dependent on your choices. The next chapter of the story takes us to the crowded and dense city of Novigrad, and it's between this city and Skellige for me that are my favourite parts of this game. The amount of stories, lore and content in these two areas are standouts for me. During the day, Novigrad is a city that's governed by zealous religious extremists, and by night, it falls under the dominion of criminal overlords. The portrayal of witch hunts in the city was pretty well executed, and the witch hunters themselves were showcased as extremely wicked. This chapter of the game has you helping out characters like a witch in dire situations. We also get introduced to many characters that eventually play important roles throughout the story, such as Dijkstra, Priscilla, and even a man whose name is unironically Whoreson Jr. At this point in the story, Geralt proceeds cautiously in Novigrad, seeking information about Ciri and his old flame Triss Merigold. Triss is in hiding, doing odd jobs to make ends meet. Geralt helps her out of a tough situation, and although she has not seen Ciri, she introduces him to Corin Tilly, a dreamseer who might have answers. Through a complex dream magic ritual, we learn that Ciri has been in contact with the bard Dandelion, who's our old friend. With the assistance of characters like Triss, Zoltan and the former spy Dijkstra, we then go on a convoluted journey throughout the city. From here is where the game fully implements Triss as a character that plays a massive role. She manages to pinpoint Dandelion's location, which is beneath the main temple of the Eternal Fire. Fast forward a bit and we eventually rescue Dandelion through doppelgangers, theatre plays and impersonations, but the rescue was all for jack shit, because fun fact, Dandelion has limited information. All he knows is that Ciri was fixated on deciphering a curse using phylactery that she had, and that he had introduced her to the notorious crime boss Whoreson Jr. The city of Novigrad is also full of other pressing matters that demand Geralt's attention. For example, there's reuniting with Vernon Roach, who is now leading a guerrilla war against Nilfgaard to free Temeria. We also meet King Radovid V of Redania, who asks for assistance in locating Philippa Eilhart. There's also the issue of Triss attempting to smuggle mages out of Novigrad, and Geralt can choose to help her, which of course expands upon the romance side of the game, before she then departs for Kovir. I found this part of the game quite enjoyable, mainly because Triss was a character that I actually liked a lot in the game. Even though Geralt and Triss are no longer together at this point in the game, I was pretty pretty determined to continue their relationship, and my only issue is that we did not get to see more of her in the game, which is a shame. There's all of these things I mentioned, but I did not talk about how Dandelion needs our help in establishing his new cabaret business. Despite the many divergers in Novigrad, we pretty much failed to find any substantial leads relating to Ciri, with our trail in Velen having brought us to Novigrad and our investigations here giving us no results. The only remaining option is to search for Ciri in the Skellige Isles. I have mixed feelings about Skellige in the game, not because it's not incredibly enjoyable, but because it feels so different from the rest of the regions. While the rest of the game has a setting that resembles the period between the Dark Ages and the Renaissance, with some areas leaning more towards one era or the other, Skellige takes a sharp turn into a unique combination of Viking culture. It felt like I had suddenly switched to playing Skyrim in a way. In Skellige, we hire a ship that gets attacked by Skellige raiders and crashes on Ard Skellig. We of course survive and head to Kaer Morhen, where King Bran's funeral is taking place. During the wake, Geralt reunites with Yennefer here and Crack and Crate. Yennefer asks for Geralt's help to steal a magical mask from the head druid's lab to investigate where Ciri could be. They use the mask to see visions of the past, revealing that Ciri was pursued by the Wild Hunt and the village of Loferton was attacked. The villagers mentioned a man named Craven, who brought Ciri there and later faced a werewolf in a sacred garden. Ciri regained her strength, but the Wild Hunt arrived, and she was taken away unconscious by the masked elf, leaving the villager named Skjal behind. Although the story isn't as helpful as we'd hoped, it does match a description that Geralt had heard before, and that description was none other than Uma, the strange creature won by the Baron in Velen. Before we actually leave Skellige, we can address a couple of important matters. We have the option to rekindle the romance with Yennefer by helping her capture a djinn and break the bond created by the original djinn. We can also aid the Arls of Skellige in finding a new ruler to replace the late King Bran. We can choose to assist one of the Arncrate children in becoming the new monarch, or just completely ignore the matter altogether. With the business in Skellige pretty much done, we then return to Velen and retrieve Uma without any complicated issues. While travelling back to Kaer Morhen with the pretty unusual companions that we have, we get stopped by Nilfgaardian troops to inform Geralt of the Emperor's dissatisfaction and request his presence. This is where we go to Vizima. Geralt and Yennefer recount their experiences to Emperor Emir, and Yennefer agrees with Geralt that Uma is cursed and that they need to utilise Kaer Morhen's resources, along with the magical incantations Geralt learned from Dandelion to lift the curse. The Emperor remains unmoved, but eventually allows them both to depart. Despite the few flaws that Skellige has, some outstanding characters and truly unforgettable moments happened here. My jaw hit the floor during a scene involving a baby and an oven, the horrors that were encountered on the Giant's Island, and even the batshit insane sacrifices Yennefer was prepared to make to rescue Ciri. Throughout the game, we've been trying to find Ciri and following the clues about her adventures with our Geralt. During this time, we've made friends and gathered allies who could potentially join you at the witch's hideout for a final showdown with the Wild Hunt. It kind of reminds me of the final mission in Mass Effect 2, where the number of survivors depends on how much effort you put into winning your crew's loyalty and the decisions you make in battle. The Witcher 3 did not take that approach, but honestly it really should have. We see other witches such as Eskel, Lambert and Vesemir. They're all working on a plan to prepare for removing the curse from Uma. Yennefer then reveals her plan, which is to subject Uma to the witch's trial of the grasses, but only for the first few stages, to make Uma more shapeable. The witches at first are reluctant because the trial of the grasses is a pretty painful and potentially life-threatening process that has not been performed in a long time. Despite their concerns, Yennefer's plan actually succeeds, and the curse on Uma is lifted, revealing his true form as the masked elf Avalak, who, fun fact, Geralt had encountered before under less friendly circumstances. Avalak tells the group that Ciri is on the Isle of Mist, and the Wild Hunt is after her for her elder blood, aiming to open a permanent gate between worlds. We then set the stage to prepare for the battle that will take place at Kaer Morhen, where the witches and their allies will confront the Wild Hunt. Anyway, before we journey to the Isle of Mist, Geralt has the opportunity to travel across the world once more and gather as many allies as possible to aid in the defense of Kaer Morhen. Characters like Zoltan, Triss, Dijkstra, the Arncrates, Vernon Roach, Kira Metz, Ermion the Head Druid, and even Letho, which caught me off guard considering we see him in previous Witcher games. All of these people can join the cause. Of course, this only would be the case provided that we made the right choices during the earlier parts of the game. The game's ending marks a noticeable departure from its earlier format, and while I found it enjoyable, it kind of represents a shift from the acts beforehand. It transitions away from its open world structure, as we pretty much explored the entire open world already, and instead presents an act of carefully crafted set pieces where you progress from one area to another to advance the plot. It's kind of similar to how the previous Witcher games did it. We travel to the Mist-Shrouded Isle and encounter a group of dwarves. After assisting them in reuniting their partners, they lead us to Ciri. At first, Ciri appears to be what looks looks like just dead and unresponsive, which at this point in the story, I remember I felt like I was about to tear up. However, the glow of Avallac'h's light seemed to revive her, and at long last, Geralt and Ciri share a heartfelt reunion after their very long separation. Ciri has so much to say to Geralt. She explains that Avallac'h had been instructing her in the mastery of her Elder Blood abilities. She explains that Eredin's world is in a state of decline, and he needs Ciri's power to enable his invading forces to enter their world. She also explains her visits to some of the otherworldly realms, and how Avallac'h ensured her safety on a world that Eredin could not locate. In summary, she basically explains everything, and I mean everything. With time slowly becoming no longer on their side, Ciri then teleports herself and Geralt back to Kaer Morhen for the battle with the Wild Hunt. Preparations are set, with traps laid, potions ready and spells cast. The team is all set for the fight. The battle at Kaer Morhen is a fierce one, and death takes its place over many. Despite fighting hard, most of the fighters actually turned into ice when Eredin showed up with a deadly frost and his top men, Imralith and Caranthir. Only Vesemir and Ciri are left standing. Vesemir puts up a tough fight, but gets caught by Imralith. Ciri thinks about surrendering to save Vesemir, but he does not want her to. This tragic set of events pretty much prompts Vesemir to make a final desperate move against Imralith, who holds him in the air. This act unfortunately costs Vesemir his life, and Ciri unleashes a furious magical outburst, emitting a piercing banshee-like cry of pure magical force that surprisingly kills numerous of the Wild Hunt soldiers and compels Eredin to withdraw. The Wild Hunt after this doesn't really receive much further development. They're pretty much 5 or 6 mini Saurons following one big Sauron. In my opinion, I felt like King Eredin should have been defeated in the Battle of Kaer Morhen, as it would have been more of a satisfying ending to Geralt's conflict with him compared to what follows in the act after this one. We see Ciri hold herself responsible for Vesemir's death. At his funeral, all the allies gather to bid farewell to one of the finest witches the continent has ever known. It's at this moment that Ciri's determination solidifies. She's now tired of running and takes Vesemir's Witcher medallion from his funeral pyre, before then walking off on her own. I must admit that I really enjoy the act at Kaer Morhen. Regardless of the outcome and how it contributes to the visual storytelling, Kaer Morhen is a castle capable of housing potentially hundreds of witches, yet it's currently inhabited by just 4 of them. I mentioned earlier in the video during the Kaer Morhen part where I see Kaer Morhen as a safe house and a decline for the witches entirely. It's obvious that they are pretty much becoming an endangered species. Even through Lambert and Eskel, we gain valuable insights into both the positive and negative aspects of being a witcher. Now, I want to just quickly skip over a few dialogues and emotional scenes and get to where the game really ends. We're pretty much tasked with killing Imralith while Ciri goes off to take down the crones. Ciri tracks them down and using her powers and sword skills defeats them, but one of the crones escapes with Vesemir's medallion. Geralt finds Imralith enjoying himself and fights him. It's a fairly tough battle, but Geralt wins and takes him down using his own weapon. Yennefer, Triss and Geralt plan to stop the Wild Hunt for good. They go to Novigrad, rescue Philippa Eilhart and Margarita Lau Antil, and they try to get the Lodge of Sorcerers back together. Ciri visits some old friends and talks to sorceresses about a plan, either on her own or with Geralt, depending on your choices if Ciri trusts him. In Novigrad, Avallac'h needs Geralt to find an elf named Gels. They want to show Gels that Eredin is a traitor. They go through different worlds and finally convince Gels not to help Eredin. Avallac'h reveals a plan to use a special artifact named the Sunstone to trap the Wild Hunt ship and fight them. They go to Skellige to find the Sunstone. There, Geralt and Ciri find Avallac'h's hidden lab and learn he's obsessed with Ciri's bloodline. At this point in the game, Ciri is upset and Geralt can help her destroy the lab. Of course, that's only if we wish to support her. With the Sunstone, we pretty much trap the Wild Hunt ship. Geralt and Ciri fight their way through, defeating Caranthir and then even facing Eredin. Geralt fights Eredin in a very intense battle on a mountain and also on the ship, eventually defeating him. Eredin warns Geralt about Avallac'h's plans for Ciri. After the battle, Geralt and Yennefer realize Ciri is missing. They see a tower glowing with energy, and Yennefer helps Geralt get past the barrier. Inside, Ciri tells them she plans to stop the White Frost herself by entering the dangerous rift. Geralt tries to stop her, but Ciri insists it's her fight. She steps into the rift, facing the White Frost. Well, that's actually depending on what you choose, and it all matters from earlier parts of the game. After all, it is an RPG, and your choices are the most important thing. Ciri will either become a witcher, an empress, or sacrifice herself to save the world. In the 3 playthroughs that I did, I managed to get 2 endings where she became a witcher, and 1 where she sacrificed herself. I honestly could not figure out how to get her to become an empress. Maybe when I replay the game for the 4th time, I'll try and aim for that ending. The Witcher games always show that choices matter. What Geralt decides affects many things, like who wins the North's War and Skellige's future. We also choose between Triss and Yennefer, but what happens after Ciri faces the White Frost is just as important. In the bad ending, Geralt is back at Crookback Bog after Ciri's death. He beats the last crone and gets back Vesemir's medallion. Surrounded by monsters, we don't know what happens to him next. It's suggested that that maybe he supposedly sacrificed himself. Of course, since we know that the next Witcher game does not focus on Geralt, maybe that's a possibility. Or maybe he is alive and I've just not read the rest of the books, if there is any. In another ending, if Geralt supports Ciri and introduces her to Emperor Emhyr, she survives the White Frost. Seeing the state of Nilfgaard, she decides to succeed her father to make things better. This is where Geralt and Ciri part ways, knowing they'll meet again. This ending happens if Geralt does not help kill Radovid V, or he does help but he sides with Roach later. The last ending is, I'm pretty sure, the most common ending. It happens if Geralt supports Ciri but does not take her to Emhyr before Bald Mountain, or he does but he helps the North win the war. Geralt meets a swordsmith who made a new Witcher sword. He meets Ciri at a tavern, gives her the sword and calls her a true Witcher. They pretty much talk about a new job and then leave together. And that brings me to the end of the story. It's a story that tells a tale of love, loss and adventure. For me, the story and characters are what makes an open world game truly unforgettable. They're what keep me engaged until the very end. That's why, in my opinion, as amazing as Skyrim is, comparing The Witcher 3 makes Skyrim seem less interesting and lacks liveliness. The three endings, in contrast, each offer a satisfying end and valid ending to the story. Even the so-called bad ending, while it is quite depressing in a way, it possesses artistic value and showcases a hauntingly beautiful sense of tragedy. Thinking of it now, it might just be my favourite ending, just because of the powerful emotions it gives off. The Witcher 3 gives us a nice blend of character interaction and combat, allowing you to emphasize one or the other based on your preference. Of course, we know the main objective is to search for your loved ones, but throughout your journey you'll encounter numerous NPCs seeking your assistance with issues that only a Witcher can solve. Completing these Witcher contracts earns you currency, and the loot and experience you gather while completing them are essential for strengthening Geralt. This progress is pretty important for tackling later main quests and facing the high level monsters you encounter during your travels. With each new level that you gain, you have the opportunity to select new abilities that offer various and potent bonuses, allowing you to tailor your combat style to your liking. As you reach higher levels, you'll gain access to superior armor and weaponry. While you'll come across various pieces of armor during exploring the game and just completing missions, the best gear is often custom crafted to you. To create these customized items, you pretty much need a crafting diagram, specific components like steel and leather, enough coin, and an armor, blacksmith or craftsman with the necessary expertise. At first, you might lack some of these requirements, but you'll eventually gather everything you need, enabling you to choose your preferred gear from a wide selection. You can also upgrade your armor and swords by adding runes and glyphs to grant them extra defensive or offensive capabilities. Combat is straightforward. It includes a light and heavy attack, a blocking button, and a somewhat underutilized counter-attack feature. You see, countering, while it is present, isn't commonly used because dodging and rolling are more accessible, and that just became my preferred style of combat. The most unique aspect of combat is the use of magical signs. These signs give you various advantages in battle. For instance, Ard generates telekinetic force to knock down enemies, while Quen creates a protective shield around Geralt, damaging nearby enemies upon penetration. Signs can also be upgraded to unlock alternative modes, giving you a more tactical approach for their use. I can admit combat can become quite demanding, especially on the hardest difficulty. To actually succeed in combat, you pretty much must focus on parrying, blocking, dodging and counter-attacking effectively. Just mere button mashing might work on easier difficulties, but the game truly shines when facing tougher enemies, actually requiring strategic planning and leveling up Geralt. Character building involves allocating points to various skills like melee, range combat, alchemy which provides in-combat bonuses through potions, and also Witcher signs. A lot of people that I've spoken to that have played The Witcher 3 have almost always criticized the combat, especially when it comes to navigating Roach, who is your horse. Horseback combat in particular was often frustrating, although I personally didn't really do any type of horse combat. I played the game on PC with a controller and I did not encounter any significant control issues in combat. It's quite funny because witches are showcased as powerful mutated humans known for their skills, but Geralt in the game may feel slightly underpowered in regular encounters, leaning more towards intellectual prowess rather than sheer physical strength. The voice acting for the characters is top notch. The body and facial animations are exceptional, capturing every gesture from subtle frowns to broad smiles. The creature and monster designs are diverse, with a wide range of unique species encountered throughout the game. Even the audio and soundtracks in general are quite immersive. As you scroll through towns, peasants and townsfolk openly share their thoughts, be it wonder or disgust about Geralt's distinctive appearance. Cats hiss in fear, kids excitedly shout, inadvertently sharing tidbits of gossip. In caves you can hear dripping water, swaying forests rustle, seas roar, boat hulls creak, and footsteps provide clues about the terrain you're traversing. Yep, You know what's coming. The real question of the video, Team Triss or Team Yennefer? Well, if you've listened to everything I said in this video, then you'd most likely know my answer. But if you don't, well, let's talk about it. Before I do talk about it though, I'm taking the books out of the equation here, so my opinion will not be swayed on what the novels say. Now, I'll just say it straight up, I chose Triss. When I first encountered Yennefer in Vizima, her treatment of Geralt struck me as rather harsh. As I progressed through Velen and met Triss, she came across as warm and kind. She possessed the same intelligence and power as Yennefer, but seemed more self-aware, acknowledging her flaws and desiring a harmonious relationship with Geralt. Given everything that Geralt had endured, it felt like he would find happiness with someone who he could relax with and wouldn't constantly challenge him about everything. She is a much more relatable character than Yennefer, with regrets, ambitions and having made mistakes. The only bad thing about her was that she barely has screen time compared to Yennefer, which is pretty understandable considering Yennefer is more deeply integrated into the main story, which pretty much forces Triss to have less dialogue, fewer romantic interactions, and shorter quests. To add on to everything I just said, I also got to mention that Triss was bravely living in a city where witches was facing persecution, just so she can utilize her powers to assist people. This stands in contrast to Yennefer, who is working for a malevolent king and refuses to actually use her powers to search for Ciri due to what seems like unfounded excuses. One of my most cherished moments in the game was Geralt's conversation with Triss, after the whole horde of rats ordeal and fighting enemies in the cellar. So yeah, my personal preference is Triss. Now that's just my opinion, so please don't get offended because I know there's some diehard Yennefer fans out there. So there you have it. The Witcher 3 is an incredible game, marking a modern masterpiece that demonstrated open world games could maintain both quality and detail while offering an abundance of amazing side content. It left a profound impact on the gaming industry, influencing future titles in the genre to prioritize meaningful and memorable side quests with substantial narrative value. In fact, the writers for Assassin's Creed Origins even said that The Witcher 3 was its main inspiration, and funnily enough, Origins is arguably my favourite Assassin's Creed game alongside Assassin's Creed 2. The Witcher 3 showcased an open world filled with the same level of attention and care found in linear games. It just shows the testament to what can be achieved with a well-defined artistic vision, a measure of financial autonomy, and also the passion and commitment to bring it all to life. While The Witcher 3 may not be flawless, in fact no game ever is flawless, it stands as my personal favourite game of all time, and I cannot see when another game will overtake it for me. I'm actually looking forward to what CD Projekt Red will achieve with The Witcher 4 or whatever it's called, even if we get it in like 5 years. If you did enjoy this video, as it did take me a while to make, be sure to hit that subscribe button as it will help me out a lot. And with that said, I'll see you in the next one.